right, here we go. The red light is on air. Well, I like to make that joke because I love radio. I love to do live recording, but in this case, we are actually recording. But we treat it as if it is live because it's a nice conversation, and this is Redefining Society and Technology podcast. My guest today is someone that I was supposed to meet in person in London, but it got a little crazy during Infosecurity Europe. So we say, hey, let's meet again. And thankfully, Abadesi, very nice of you to take the time to meet with me. And I figure, you know what, let's just talk about technology in general. We don't need to focus on cybersecurity. We're not in London at Infosecurity Europe. And I feel like it's going to be a really fun conversation, especially because we already chatted a little bit before he recorded. I think I should have already recorded that. But hey, here we are. So welcome to the show. I'm really excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, really great to be here.
Yeah. So how about we start with a little introduction about who you are? I mean, I know your background is very multicultural and you keynoted Infosecurity. So, tell us a little bit about where you come from and how you got connected with technology and cybersecurity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I have had such a great fortune to work at everything from big tech like Amazon to small startups like Groupon before the IPO, Hotel Tonight. Most recently, I was at Brandwatch, which is a SaaS company, social listening tools, as their first ever global vice president of community and belonging. But now I'm focused on my business, Hustle Crew. And our mission is really simple. We want to help ambitious teams in tech and beyond become more inclusive. And we think that we can do this by educating them on things like unconscious bias, curiosity, empathy. And I feel that, especially in an increasingly AI obsessed world, it's these more human traits that are actually going to help us build products that genuinely make a positive social impact and really serve, a diverse society. And, you mentioned my multicultural background. I think I'm obsessed with diversity and inclusion and representation because that's just the world that I grew up in. My dad was from Nigeria. My mom was from the Philippines. I was always around so many different cultures. I went to a church that was really diverse. I would go to, community like meetups in my neighborhood and see people of all continents speaking all languages. And my dad was a diplomat. So we moved around a lot. He worked for the International Monetary Fund, which is like a UN agency. And in, the first few years of my life, I'd already lived in 4 or 5 countries, America, Tanzania, Kenya. And I would go to international schools and see friends from Scandinavia, Southern Europe, East Asia, South America. And you would go to, each other's houses after school. And it was like stepping into a new country on every play date, and we would have world culture days where we could wear our local dress and bring our local dishes. So before I was even a teenager, my assumption was that difference is amazing and difference is really, really good. And when I started working in tech, my first job was at Groupon. And because we were growing so quickly in London, we had a lot of diversity. We were just hiring so fast. And then as I spent more and more time in tech companies like Amazon, for example, getting more senior, I realized actually you don't necessarily always have lots of women, lots of cultures, lots of countries, lots of languages. And that's when I decided to start Hustle Crew, 2016, almost 10 years ago. I thought maybe if I start talking about this more, building community, helping companies, I can do, my part to make the industry more diverse by tackling what's stopping us from being diverse. Because, in a city like London, where I live, you can go to the tube station and see all types of people. And then you walk into a WeWork and you just see engineers, men. What's happening, so, why can't we replicate that diversity? So yeah, that's really what I focus on now through my work at Hustle Crew, through my podcast Techish, through the articles I write, everything.
Yeah, I'm actually, when I stay in London, because then it's easy to get to the Excel. I stay through the Elizabeth line and already 2 years, I stay in Whitechapel, which is very Bangladeshi community there. And I just walk the street and I feel like, I also live in LA, so I see a lot of diversity there too. But I grew up in Italy, where I am right now, and I just share everything you just said because I found myself in the same situation when I started doing technology and cybersecurity. Yeah, you just talk to a bunch of white dudes. And when I'm a white dude, so nobody's going to get pissed about me saying that because it's the truth.
Yeah.
And so I started looking into from a sociological perspective and psychological as well. Like, things like when you have diversity, you actually come out with product that work for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think you make better product. And I
Mm.
think not many people can deny that. And
Mm.
I honestly don't know why we find ourselves still talking about this, because apparently not everybody got the memo. So what do you do for, let's say, like, all right, let me tell you this again and again and
Yeah.
again. Like,
Yeah.
what could you think could be the tipping point that where,
Mm.
you know,
Yeah.
behavior, culture takes time and sure, but what is your perspective and experience on that?
That's a really great question, because I know before we started recording, we were talking a bit about how philosophy and ethics and sociology, human behavior, psychology, all these things are increasingly you know present in the world of technology, whether it's about how we design our products or how we engage users. And your question of how do I tackle the repetitiveness of this conversation, or how do I tackle the resistance to change? I think it all comes down to influence. That's really what education is. Education is a way to influence someone and say, you may not have seen this, you may not understand this, but I'm going to show you that this is a new way of thinking that can be really beneficial to you, really valuable to you. And that's what I think also makes it really hard, because what influences you, Marco, as a person, of your, lived experience isn't necessarily the same for like another Marco. So,
Hmm.
education for the masses is only effective when you can target each individual. And one of the things that we try to do at Hustle Crew is use like every tool in our arsenal. So sometimes we focus on storytelling. If you think of films like Hidden Figures, which highlighted these amazing Black women in NASA,
Hmm.
these amazing mathematicians and software engineers, that was a really powerful way for people to go, oh, wow, women were involved in the Cold War and like the space race. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Black women, that's incredible. So sometimes we rely on storytelling. Sometimes we rely on data. Some people just want to know the numbers. They want to know, oh, I see women all the time. Why do we still need to talk about women in tech? And then it's helpful for us to say, actually, less than 1 in 5 tech workers are women, and that's even less when you think of engineering, R&D roles. So sometimes that's the approach we take. Other times it's even just more personal. If someone says a really biased comment like, oh, women don't make good coders, or women don't make good salespeople, then I might say, who are the women in your life? Oh, well, I have a daughter. Okay, well, how would you feel if someone told your daughter, no, you can't be a salesperson, no, you can't be an engineer, I'm going to decide what you can do? And they say, oh, no, she can do whatever she wants. She can do anything. And I'm
Hmm.
like, well, exactly. So, sometimes you
That's my
really have
point.
exactly. So, it really depends. You have to meet people where they're at. And I think what is really interesting is like ultimately like what we know makes us who we are, but we don't really accept that.
Mhm.
So sometimes when you are in an educating role, you're almost trying to get someone to think differently about who they are. And people don't like that. People don't want to feel like they're wrong. And people don't want to feel also like ashamed or guilty, right? If you say to someone, hey, you over there, yeah, you have a lot of privilege. You've had a lot of, opportunities that other people haven't had. You could then set someone on a road where they're questioning every role they've ever held and every position they've ever gained, going, wait, this isn't a meritocracy. I wasn't the best person for the job. Like I can't even begin to start thinking that, because I'm going to feel bad or I'm going to feel
Mm.
ashamed. And so it's also sometimes about messaging things in a way where we're not here to focus on those feelings. We're here to focus on the future opportunities to make change. You know what I mean? Like what can we do now that we know this? What can we do to level the playing field, to promote more young girls to study STEM subjects so that they can grow into amazing, engineers or product people? And then also, how can we build cultures at work that make women want to stay? So if someone does something that makes someone feel unsafe, how can there be consequences for that? And similarly, if someone goes away to have kids, how can there still be opportunities for them when they come back, and not this idea like, oh, well, you have kids now, so you're probably stupider than you were before, or less focused, or whatever horrible assumptions people make. But this happens, like this does happen. So yeah, I think it's always going to be this way. I don't imagine a future where we don't have ignorance of these issues, or where the playing field is perfectly level, because it's baked into who we are to only care about the problems that affect us. And if it's a problem that doesn't affect us, it takes a really long time, lots of different ways to really understand. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying now. I'm going to try to do better, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does make sense. I mean, I could jump on the storytelling. I do have another podcast that I just talk about storytelling in any form.
Amazing.
So storytelling for me, it is the key. And in cybersecurity as well, it's more and more about how do we translate tech into business, tech into
Yeah.
culture, and so on. So storytelling, it's absolutely important. And I love what you said about you kind of need to adapt the story. It's not always the same. Maybe the moral of the story, the plot is the same, but you need to be very careful on how you deliver it. And, when you're a speaker, you kind of need to read the room, right? Gotta
Absolutely.
read the room so you can be more effective and so on. But I also love what you said about the fact that yet let's be honest, and let's realize that there is always going to be, it's human, that us and them, right? And there is always,
Yes.
unfortunately, that, and even people that don't do it in a negative or ugly way, of course, but it's there. And unfortunately, I think it's important to realize that we need to always find better way to overcome it. And I don't think you just switch a button and all of a sudden,
Exactly.
we are in this utopia that I have as a background on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, besides like the workspace, let's talk about your work on company that created technology for consumers. And how do you see actually, or convince people, or have like maybe proof that a diverse group of people actually build better product? Because I have no doubts about it.
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think, when it really like strikes a chord for people or hits home for people is often when stories go viral on social media or on the internet. Like I remember when TikTok first launched, there was a lot of content of expats who live in China. So, foreigners that come and live in China. And there were a lot of videos of, Black migrants that had moved to China, like Black expats, trying to use like hand dryers, like, photosensitive, light sensitive hand dryers.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't pick up their dark skin. They always had to show like the white side of their palms. Otherwise the hand dryers wouldn't be activated. And these would just go viral and people would laugh and like, did no one think to like test this on like dark skin? And then, I remember when the Apple Watch first launched, there was such a backlash from women users because it was supposed to have this amazing comprehensive health app, but this health app didn't have a period tracker, didn't have a cycle tracker. And women were like, okay, so I have this really expensive device that apparently tracks all of my health needs, but I still need another app to track my period. That's not really helpful. And, I remember when the study from Georgia State University, maybe around 2018, 2019 came out, where they had done tests of autonomous vehicles going to pedestrian crossings and detected that autonomous vehicles weren't recognizing dark-skinned pedestrians. So they weren't stopping in the tests for dark-skinned pedestrians. And they were like, this is terrifying and really scary because, of course, all skin tones pedestrians exist. So I think sometimes it does take a big scandal or a big backlash for teams to suddenly go, oh my gosh, that could be us. And, with Hustle Crew, I've had the good fortune to work with everything from like, we've worked with Wave AI, one of the biggest autonomous vehicle makers here in the UK. We have, gone in and reminded people, look around your team and think of who's missing. Those are your priority beta testers. Those are your priority feedback group, because even I standing here as, a Black and Asian woman, for me to get the opinion of someone with a disability, someone who is 2 foot taller than me, someone with smaller hands than me, like whatever it might be, the minute I start guessing, I'm just making assumptions. And as I tell my team, assumptions are dangerous. Assumptions are very, very dangerous. So yeah, like I think it's all about, almost using some of these stories, these scandalous stories, as a wake-up call. And then from that point of fear of messing up, fear of getting it wrong, saying, okay, so here's how you can not get it wrong. You can like look around and try and, diversify the voices at the table and think about that. And one of the shortcuts that I have, one of the hacks that I have is we're often building products for the most advantaged people, right? Like that is just like a very rational thought because you're building a business and you're just like, I'm building this for people with opportunities, with disposable income, with capital, et cetera, et cetera. And you're also building it in the image of you and your team are probably quite advantaged people. If you're working in startups, you're probably in a big city somewhere, you went to good university, you're earning a decent salary. But imagine a world where by default, products and services were built for the least advantaged people. It will still work for people with advantages, right? But the bonus is it also works for people with fewer advantages. The people
It may
with the
actually
least
be
amount of
working
privilege.
better.
Exactly. So it's like, all we have to do is flip it around. And, it takes a little more effort. It takes a little more time. But that's only because it's not been the default so far. One of our clients right now at Hustle Crew is the Barbican Center. So, the Barbican Center, whether you love brutalism as an architecture movement or hate brutalism, it's an outstanding space. And it's so important in our history in terms of how architects and builders and communities responded to the war and how that changed how we use resources and how we changed how we live, communal living, etc. But in the 60s, no one thought about wheelchairs. They were not thinking about wheelchairs or people with walking sticks or people with canes or anything like that. You just had a bunch of, people who are just like, let's build something beautiful. Let's build something that's communal. Let's build something that's practical. And now, in the 2020s, that's one of the biggest challenges as a company that's trying to, as an organization that's trying to be more diverse, equitable, inclusive, accessible, these physical constraints, these physical barriers. And I'm just using that as an example of how, if we flip around our way of thinking and go, let's assume there will be people with accessibility needs that need this space. It will work for them. It will still also work with us. I don't need accessibility space, but I can walk up a ramp as easily as I can walk upstairs. It's just a slanted floor, right? Like I can manage that. So yeah, it's just a different way of thinking. And then I think ideally more and more teams could adopt that.
As you're saying that, and I'm thinking the train or buses, or the tube, right? I mean, it's still for a lot of people, they still are not up to date with the standard of disability that you have.
Yeah.
But also, you can just hurt yourself for your knee, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, it's flat. I don't have a permanent disability, but right now it's actually helping me. That's why I'm saying you actually make a better product for everybody.
Everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Or if you have your pet, or if you have a pram, or if you're wheeling a bike. Yeah, I 100% agree. We're leveling the playing field for all of us. I think one of the constraints that has to be acknowledged is time and money, because people are like, oh, doing things differently requires time. Like these processes already work this way. Now I need to think of a new process. I need to get buy-in for that new process. And I think that in a way that is a false economy, right? Because we always say we don't have the time to make changes. We don't have time to challenge the status quo. But there's an ever increasing group of people whose needs are not met by the status quo. So really, we're just deferring the problem while the problem is getting
more expensive, because you're going to have to knock down what you've done before to redesign it again.
Exactly.
You may as well invest a little bit more time now and money.
100%. So I never really accept that argument of, we don't have time, downtime. And I was like, well, it's going to take more time. It's going to take more resource. So you either address it now or you do address it later, when it, yeah, to your point, is just more costly in many ways.
Mm-hmm. You know what I want to talk about in the time that we have left? Like the different technology that now we have. So instead of saying, okay, technology is a consequence of our way of thinking, we're now on a point where we have generative artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
we have simulation, we have a ton of data, we're building robotics. And so we can simulate a little bit more what maybe the world of tomorrow, or even a piece of technology, like we do with medicine, with drugs. We can test so many different drugs in such a little amount of time through
Yes.
artificial intelligence. And I'm wondering, like, are we there where we actually realize that, hey, you know what, now maybe technology is going to help us to have a better society, because we actually can look at creating a scenario or a simulation where we can say, well, this is a product that actually can serve everybody. I mean, do you see these being used, or maybe getting there? I don't know. I like to wear a future, thinker hat.
Yes, a future proof, or like, yeah, future looking perspective. It's very interesting because I feel very torn. I think fundamentally I am an optimistic person, and that's why I do the work that I do, because I believe it makes an impact, and I can see that in the data and in the, feedback, and that's really positive. But at the same time, again, similar to you with that social science background, we were talking about, the academic lives we lived before corporate. I'm very aware of the fact that, in a way, we are our biggest problem, right? Like, I think the reason why we haven't found this ideal society isn't for lack of the technology to get us there. I think it's, to your point, that we have these brains that aren't really evolved thousands of years.
Very prehistoric in a way.
Yeah, that get us into this thinking of us versus them, or get us into a scarcity mindset, or are very
Fear.
driven by fear, anxiety, concern, and we remember negative things more than positive things, and we're always scared, and we're always anxious, and we're always feeling lonely and misunderstood and disconnected. And that's even more so the case with social media. If you read some of the scary stuff about young people, children, teenagers, and how they're really struggling to, have boundaries with screen time, and struggling to make, authentic off-screen connections with each other, IRL connections with each other. So I think one of my concerns about artificial intelligence is how it will further divide us. And I think it's something that we have to be really mindful of. So the first thing is from a wealth perspective. Most Gen AI that is being used every day is owned by a small group of people. And we already have super wealthy people from big tech companies, and we can see that that hasn't necessarily like trickled down into society. If anything, they're so creative with their taxes that, we're really not seeing the benefits of all of that money coming into government, coming into society. So there's that. And then I think there's the skills gap. I was at a 70th birthday party, my father-in-law's 70th birthday party on the weekend. And my husband and I use AI probably every day, generative AI. And there are many people at that party that hadn't even used it yet, hadn't even used it once. And then that makes me, oh gosh, like the world is changing so rapidly, and you're going to get left behind, just like people who never got smartphones, or people who still send text messages with all caps. But yeah, I definitely think, you do make a fair point, which is there are now innovative and creative ways for us to build our empathy, to be influenced, to change. And, for a while now, people have been using emerging technologies like VR, for example, to try and make you see what it would be like to face prejudice. There's already companies that are innovating, or gaming companies, creating worlds where you can see what it feels like to, face discrimination. So yeah, I definitely think we'll still see, all of these tools applied to influence positive change. And I'm really excited about it. But I think as individuals, we should, one, hold these companies accountable, because they wield a lot of power. They also make a huge environmental impact. And I think we should hold them accountable to put their resources into negating all of the bad things that they do and offsetting all of the like bad things they do environmentally and stuff like that. And then, yeah, I think as individuals, we also should not feel left behind, because this is the same thing that happens with coding and technical skills. There's like a certain group of people that go, that's too hard for me, that's too difficult for me, and get left behind. And I think the same thing's going to happen with applications of AI. And it makes me sad when young people are like being discouraged from using AI, because of course I understand it affects critical thinking, and that should definitely be an important conversation, but also it's a tool that's not going anywhere. So instead of telling them to not use the tool, we should be encouraging them to use the tool in like creative ways or ways that enhance, their fundamental learning, instead of, shaming them because they're going to do it anyway. That's like you telling me not to use my calculator on my maths homework. I'll just wait till you leave the room and then I'll use it then. So, yeah, these are the things that I think about.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I'm glad that you kind of looked at things from the different perspective, because I can go utopian and dystopian in 3 seconds, like from one to another. So now I'm back there with you. But I agree. I mean, even training, all the training of machine learning and applied to create generative AI. I mean, we've seen many cases of bias actually brought to life by generative AI engines, and I think again you go into the fact that those are tools. We need to educate people to use the tools, and there's no questions about that. So definitely not saying, don't say no.
Yeah.
It's very important, but also say why eventually you want to make certain decision, go in certain direction, and teach people how to use it. I think it's very important. As you say, it's not going to go anywhere. Well, I hope that we're going to be able to drive this technology to actually benefit us. And again, not just about using technology because it's there, but creating a technology that is going to serve us as societies as we move forward. And I think also because it's a very much more diverse society nowadays, respect on what, people travel more, we are all connected, we see what's happening around the world. Before it was much easier, I think, to be enclosed in your small world. And nowadays, I think if you do that, it's by choice and not because, it's kind of like, no, then I'm not going to use generative AI ever. And I can see my 87-year-old dad saying exactly that. Well, I can see my mom, that she's a writer, to use actually generative AI at 75. And I'm like, that's awesome. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, you don't need to be an expert.
Yeah.
You can certainly use it. So, and that's a challenge too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that I'm very curious about, because right now, generative AI is a more pleasant experience than, let's say, searching Google, because you're not seeing ads, you're not seeing these AI summaries, you're not seeing sponsored content. You want a quick answer and you're getting it. And if you want it refined, you can do that. It will be very interesting to see the long arc of time. Like, I kind of want to fast forward into the future and see what happens when these companies become obsessed with becoming profitable and scaling quicker, how they start thinking about monetization. At the end of the day, capitalism is quite predictable. So advertising is not far away. And then the relationship we have in terms of the trust we have will inevitably start shifting, and there'll be something maybe new on the horizon, who knows. But that's what I'm extremely curious about now. Like, what does our relationship with these tools look like as inevitably advertising and other monetization strategies start to creep in? I don't know if you saw the most recent season of Black Mirror on Netflix, but there's an episode where this incredible innovative technology brings someone back to life. So they pay for this subscription plan and it helps them basically stay conscious, but over time they start getting ads streamed into their consciousness. And to not have to listen to the ads, they have to pay more and more and more. And I just think, is that going to happen with Gen AI? Are we going to have to pay more or do something to make sure that the answers we're getting aren't sprinkled with sponsored content? Let's see.
I am envisioning, while you're saying this, I'm thinking like product placement in movies that back in the days it was very easy to see a pack of cigarettes or a Coke or whatever, like a brand, and nobody needed at the time to tell you, I'm disclosing that I'm actually advertising for this product. Now you don't see that anymore. So I'm thinking like very soon your friendly, generative AI is gonna kind of like make an advertising move on you, and either you don't know at all and you're just being manipulated, versus because you're now spending the extra money to cut the ads away from it. I'm excited to see where it's going, and I'm excited to have this kind of conversation where we put our thinking caps on and we try, like I often say, my podcast is not about giving answers, it's about making people think.
Nice.
And I think with this kind of conversation, there's a lot to think about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm very grateful for your time. I think
Thank-
these are very, very relevant topic, and I hope that actually I haven't heard your podcast yet, so I'll break it down. Let's do what is it called? Techish?
It's called Techish. It comes out every week. It's me and my friend Michael, who's another tech founder, and we just talk about the stories that we're most interested in across startup life, tech, entrepreneurship, but also just culture, society. Yeah,
it's all connected, right?
It is.
And it's a two-way road as well, so it's not just one that affect the other, but we kind of affect each other at the same time, even when we don't realize that. So thank you again. I hope to have you again in the future.
I'd love that. Thank you.
So we can chat a little bit more. It's definitely a much bigger conversation than 30 minutes, but I'm glad
Absolutely.
we had it. And for everybody, please stay tuned, subscribe and share, and get in touch with Abadesi. And she has a website, which I will put in the notes, and LinkedIn and everything else. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Very, very happy to have you.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thank you.